India and the United States resumed their high-level 2+2 ministerial talks on Friday with discussions involving Foreign Minister S Jaishankar, his counterpart, the Secretary of State from the United States Antony Blinken, Defense Minister Rajnath Singh and the US Secretary Defense General Lloyd. These are annual talks held alternatively in India and the United States and takes forward the deep strategic relationship between the countries. This comes at a time when there's been a major announcement of huge strategic importance. The US will invest $500 million into a major port being constructed by the Adani Group in Colombo. This at a time when the Chinese have made massive inroads in the region, having invested in Sri Lanka's Hambantota port, a cause of major concern for India. But as far as the 2+2 process is concerned, this is what the talks are about. India and the US are looking at co-production in the defense sector and a focus on technology transfer. Enhancing military capability. For example, India is looking at acquiring the Predator drone, the MQ-9B as it is known, in a deal valued $3 billion. Will there be progress in this? Widely expected. Transfer of new military technology to India. Perhaps the most significant is the manufacture of GE jet engines in India, which will power India's Tejas fighter jets. India and the US are looking closely at technology to mitigate the impact of climate change. India is also a part of the Artemis Accords that the Prime Minister signed when he was in the United States. This is for the peaceful development of space. India is also expected to send an astronaut to the International Space Station. The biggest international concerns, the war in Ukraine and the Israel-Hamas conflict, will likely figure in some of the talks as well. Well, joining us now, Rajiv Dogra, Raymond Vikri, the former US Assistant Secretary of Commerce, with us as well, and Jayant Krishna, Senior Fellow in the US-India Policy at the Center for Strategic and International Studies, CSIS. Mr. Vikri, let me come to you first. This is all about India and the United States taking forward a process which has been on now for the last several years. In terms of deliverables, do you expect anything significant to be announced this time?
Well, thanks very much for having me. I think that this, as you say, is a continuation of what Prime Minister Modi and President Biden have been involved in over the past year. This has been the year for U.S.-India relations. And I expect both the GE matter and the drones, you'll have further announcements in regard to making a reality out of those pronouncements. Beyond that, I think this is a very important meeting because it comes at a time of intense international turmoil. India is a great nation. There is no question about that. And one would hope that this would further the U.S.-India partnership, not just in regard to the Indo-Pacific and what happens with China and what happens on India's borders, but that India will take up the mantle of its responsibilities as a great power in regard to what happens in Russia, Ukraine, and more particularly in regard to what happens in Palestine and Hamas. India is a leader of the global South. In my view, Palestine is very much a part of the global South. India has ties with Israel and the Palestinians. It's one of the few places in the world where you can go in New Delhi and see a Palestine embassy building. And so I think it has special responsibilities, and hopefully these two great democracies will make further progress. In regard to Hambantota, I think it's extremely important that this being something done in Sri Lanka. I have for a long time said, you can't beat Belt and Road with nothing. And infrastructure is key in terms of the security of the Indo-Pacific. And this is a great step forward. So I'm hopeful that there will be even further announcements in regard to that partnership.
Jayant Krishna, we'll talk about 2+2 in a moment, but the deal or the agreement as far as the port in Colombo is now, it's been announced. It's a huge investment by the US at $500 million. China has invested in Sri Lanka in the past. There are strategic concerns, not just for the US, but India as well. We work together in a partnership. If you look at it from that prism, what is the significance of this deal?
See, I think it is, Vishnu, very significant. I mean, if you look at China today, while if you look at 2+2, strictly the format is bilateral and largely defense and strategic issues. But the fact is, wherever there are discussions today, globally, bilateral, multilateral, whatever, China invariably figures there. The kind of coercion it has been exercising in terms of military, economic, and diplomacy. We all know that the kind of posturing they have been making in the Indo-Pacific, of which Sri Lanka is also a part, including the Indian Ocean, the Central and Western Pacific, as well as, the South China Sea. So I think the kind of maneuver China has been doing, in Indo-Pacific, which is actually very, very resource-rich, ocean territory, So I think having a port in Sri Lanka, largely funded by the US, that's a huge development, and in a way, it will negate, the maneuver that China has been doing in that region. And let's also not forget, this 2+2 dialogue is happening at a time which is, almost like a prelude to the Quad discussions. Yes. Although it is still not certain whether the President Biden would come to India next month when India hosts that meeting. But I think a lot of discussions could also focus around that, as well as the fact that India has invited him to be the chief guest for the Republic Day. Yeah. So I think it's a huge development to my mind.
Ambassador Dogra, before again we get to 2+2, there have been so many concerns in Sri Lanka as far as we are concerned. Chinese spy ships deployed in Hambantota. We've seen this over the last couple of years. We've seen Chinese submarines dock in Sri Lanka as well. Sri Lanka has not been able to make not been able to finance the development of Hambantota, which is why it's returned to Chinese possession. With America now contributing to the port in Colombo, how does that balance the strategic interests of so many players, primarily India and the United States?
Sri Lanka port by Adani is a container port. So I don't think we should immediately think of it as a strategic challenge to China or a strategic response to China. It is not that. But at the same time, the US commitment to have one of the largest investment that reports say it has made in Asia in such a venture is by itself a statement, because a deep sea port can be used for any number of purposes. And especially when we have huge concerns about Chinese activities, about the submarines going to dock at Sri Lanka, and also their spy ships reportedly docking or going near Sri Lanka on an almost regular basis. So I think the statement coming just before 2+2 is an important indicator of American trust in actual joint collaboration with an Indian company in a major venture in a Sri Lankan port. The second thing is that China, US, France, and I think one more country have had similar situation in Africa, in Djibouti, if I'm not mistaken, where they have naval bases next to each other. So watching each other is not a new phenomenon in today's world. And without causing any undue conflict, they are watching each other's activities also. And India has all the more reason to be concerned about China, because it has at least one major port in Pakistan, if not two. It has reportedly a port in UAE, and there are also reports of a port in Oman, besides many other places. So the Sri Lanka announcement coming as it does before 2+2 is both important, and in time, who knows, it could become strategic.
Yeah. Jayan Krishna, let's turn our attention a little bit to 2+2 and the big items on board. India has been talking drones from the United States for at least the last 10 years. It's gone terribly slow, as most Indian defense deals do. But is there a sense now that we are on the cusp of actually getting that happening?
It's very difficult to say that, Vishnu. I mean, the fact is that there was some headway in the initiative we have on the critical and emerging technologies, the ISET. Also, the India-US Defense Acceleration Ecosystem, which is acronymed as IndusX. I think that has also seen the light of the day, but much action has to happen there. As India has been keen that whatever co-production or co-manufacturing happens, there actually technology transfer happens. So that it's a win-win for both the countries. Space-wise, also, I think there could be some collaborative discussions, especially for some joint projects or missions between ISRO and NASA. I think these things would happen for sure, and also on the climate action. The COP28 would happen later, and India has been talking about a huge commitment from the global north on reducing their carbon footprint, and also they are footing the bill for the climate crisis and the emergency. I think those things are likely to come up, and not much has come in the public space so far that what exactly would be discussed on the defense collaboration. But India's position has been very, very clear that they want more and more technology transfer to actually happen to the country. And both the nations benefit from this co-manufacturing of the items which are being talked about. I have not seen much progress on the drone that you spoke about, Vishnu.
Let's see, I think it might actually happen in 2024. There could possibly be some progress, but it's still a couple of months away. Mr. Vikri, all of this is great when we talk up the India-US relationship. We are natural partners, but there have been a couple of areas of divergence as well. One of them most recently with regard to India's relations with Canada, which have really nosedived. No two ways of looking at that. With the death of a Khalistani terrorist over there, Canada saying that India was responsible, pointing to evidence which had been collected from the Five Eyes group. Is that something you see coming up in conversation?
Well, I think that both India and the United States want to put the Canadian situation into the past. The actions of Prime Minister Trudeau in making the kind of accusations that he did without any revealing of evidence was a totally improper way. The United States obviously has a very fine line to walk here. But I think that the United States realizes that the Prime Minister Trudeau facing an election and needing support from certain communities is not really reflective of Canada, nor is it reflective of the U.S.-Canada and even India relationship. So, yes, I think that there will be discussions, but I don't think you're going to see public discussions about this. I think this is going to try to be handled as it should have been in the first place, and that is behind the scenes. And hopefully there will be a greater realization of how serious it is when you're talking about separatism, taking a state out of India. We had our own civil war here in the United States that killed more Americans than in all the other wars that we've been involved in put together. So it's a very serious matter, but the way in which these things need to be handled is behind the scenes as befits democracies. So I think there'll be discussions, but I don't think you're going to see public discussions about this.
Ambassador Dogra, I think one of the key aspects of the relationship between India and the US is that at one level it's really technology driven. So for example, when you're talking about semiconductors, that's an area of technology transfer, or the creation of resilient supply chains. When you're looking at new forms of energy, battery technology, etc., again, it's technology driven. One of the biggest technology benchmarks in the relationship is the transfer of technology to India through GE, which was likely to set up a plant over here for jet engines. And this is something that India has wanted for decades. And it's not happened for various reasons. Our own efforts at building our own jet engines didn't exactly meet the standards which we wanted. So tell us a little bit about what that represents, the confidence that America has in India in being willing to sell or transfer the holy grail of aviation technology?
Well, for a long time, that has been the grudge, that when it comes to the crunch, America hesitates. It does not transfer real technology. But that, I think, a first step has been taken, as you mentioned, with regard to the jet engines. So that is a positive step. But let us see how fast it translates actually on ground. The second thing, I think the messaging which has come from holding this 2+2 meeting at this time, when America is engaged intensely in some other parts of the world, Ukraine and Israel. So that by itself sends a message. The second message which it sends about America-India relationship is the calls made by Prime Minister recently, A, to Egypt, and B, to Iran just 2 days back. So obviously there's a lot going on behind the scenes which at present is not in public knowledge. So maybe all this could add up to clarify issues with regard to the concern we have that when it comes to crunch, America does not part with sensitive technology or does not give us the technology to the extent that it has by one way or the other, by stealing or borrowing, has been obtained by China.
Right.
So I think that part of the equation needs to come out on ground in actual practice. It has not happened so far.
All right. Well, let's see. It seems to be headed in that direction in many areas. But I'd like to thank you all very much for joining us. What I'd like to turn our attention to now is a little bit more on the strategic significance of the U.S. investment of $500 million into the Adani port in Sri Lanka, the significance in the context of where India stands with the U.S. with a mutual concern of China.
In a first-of-its-kind investment in any Indian port, United States government announced that it will provide $553 million to finance a port terminal in Sri Lanka's capital Colombo, which is being developed by the Adani Group. The deep-water shipping container terminal in the port of Colombo will provide critical infrastructure for the South Asian region. In a statement, the U.S. International Development Finance Corporation said, and I quote, "Sri Lanka is one of the world's key transit hubs. DFC's commitment of $553 million in private sector loans for the West Container Terminal will expand its shipping capacity, create greater prosperity for Sri Lanka without adding to sovereign debt, while at the same time strengthening the position of our allies across the region." Unquote. The port of Colombo is the largest and busiest transshipment port in the Indian Ocean. Nearly half of all container ships pass through its waters.
The reason why it is extremely important is because if I'm not wrong, this will be the first Indian port company for a port asset we are getting a DFC financing. Second, based on their process, the rigor that they have gone through, it just repose faith that on our execution capability, on our ability to make a viable business out of it.
This is also being seen as one of the biggest infrastructure investments by the United States with an eye to curb China's influence in the region. China has invested around $2.2 billion in Sri Lanka, which has been the biggest foreign direct investment in the country. While investments into Sri Lankan infrastructure were meant to boost the country's economy, several analysts argued that following the country's economic collapse, the Chinese investments in fact deepened the crisis and led to the debt trap. Sri Lankan government, however, has asserted that India is their strongest ally.
Given that at the end of the day, Sri Lanka will always have its independence in its decision making, and we will do what is best for the country and its citizens. If we choose to take a non-aligned stand in this particular region, then that's what the due diligence we do for our citizens. But however, we do recognize the fact that India is our closest neighbor and our strongest ally. There's no doubt about that.
The new terminal being developed by the Adani Group will come as a boost to the region, taking advantage of Sri Lanka's prime position on major shipping routes. With Vikas Srivastav, NDTV Bureau Report.
Well, a little while earlier on, Vikas Srivastav of BQ Prime, our sister network, spoke to Karan Adani, the CEO of Adani Ports, on the significance of the US investment over there, what the port seeks to achieve, and the broader geopolitical messaging which goes out.
Hello and welcome to BQ Prime. I am Vikas Srivastav. Today Adani Group has secured $553 million funding from US government agency, which is Development Finance Corporation. This, the company claims, is one of the largest in the port sector in Sri Lanka, and also it has kind of reposed faith back into Adani Group in terms of the financial and execution capabilities of the company is concerned. Today we have with us Mr. Karan Adani. He is the Chief Executive Officer of Adani Ports and SEZ, and he will talk to us about the financing as well as their terminal in Colombo and their future plans. Welcome to BQ Prime, Mr. Adani.
Thank you. Thank you.
So how important has been this funding for the group? If you can take our viewers through this.
Sure. So this is, first of all, this is a very vigorous process that we've been going through for the last 18 months with DFC. This is a project financing arrangement that we have achieved, a 20-year loan and a very competitive pricing. This is the reason why it is extremely important is because if I'm not wrong, this will be the first Indian port company for a port asset we are getting a DFC financing. Second, based on their process, the rigor that they have gone through, it just repose faith that on our execution capability, on our ability to make a viable business out of it, and also on our governance structure. That was a very important part for getting this loan as well.
Right. And you said it's a 20-year term loan. Can you talk about the structure of the financing in terms of the total debt or the equity contribution and the return on investment?
Sure. So it's the project is financed at 70-30, 70% debt, 30% equity, and that is for the phase one, which would be roughly $700 million of investment, and then with phase two it would be roughly $1.2 billion of $1.2 billion will be the total investment, including phase one and phase two, and the return we are expecting minimum of 16% on this asset.
So this is the maximum return that you have on
minimum.
This in terms of other ports, if you compare. So this, how do you place this return?
So if you look at our other assets, Mundra, which is our largest port, which has been in operations now almost 25 years, there our return today stands at almost 22%. So as the number of years happen, I'm sure this terminal will also achieve that sort of milestone.
Okay. Can you talk a little bit about this Colombo terminal that you have partnered with John Keells and with the Colombo Ports Authority?
Sure. So here we have a JV partner. We have John Keells, which is Sri Lanka's one of Sri Lanka's largest private player conglomerate. And also Sri Lankan Port Authority is also a partner, and APSEZ holds 51%. It is a 1.4 kilometer of berth length, and basically we can handle at simultaneously 3 vessels of 20,000 TEUs. So just to give you in perspective, one vessel is equal to almost 10 football fields. So that's the size of vessels that we can handle over here, and more importantly, this will add a capacity of almost 3.2 to 3.3 million TEUs into our portfolio. More importantly for us, why we took this position is because if you see, almost 50% of India's container gets transshipped into Colombo, and we took this position, and and the reason we are making it such a large terminal, more efficient terminal, is because we want to give surety to our customers who are using our ports in India, to give them the seamless connectivity, visibility, transparency on their movement of volume, as well as give our partners same sort of operational experience benchmark as what we are giving in India. And hence with that we are hoping that with that we would be able to help in reducing the overall cost of logistics of our customers. That's the end.
So how this would complement your one of the largest transshipment hub that you're building in Vizhinjam in Kerala also?
So Vizhinjam and Colombo will be complementary to each other. If you look at this part of the world, and if you look at this peninsula, we are always running short of capacity. And the trade is moving so much faster, much ahead than the infrastructure is able to keep pace. And we are very confident that with Vizhinjam as well as with Colombo, they would act as a complementary and give our customers a better solution based on what they like, what they prefer. And as we said, that both of these terminals will give the same experience, same operational benchmark, and the same savings to the customers.
Okay. Apart from Sri Lanka, are you also looking at adding some more strategic ports to your portfolio?
So we keep looking at our opportunities outside India. We are more focused in neighboring countries, like Bangladesh, Sri Lanka. We are already there. Eastern Africa. We're looking at Vietnam as well as a possibility. We look at Mediterranean. After Israel, how do we connect other countries in that region? So we keep looking, exploring at those opportunities. And the idea is that how do we create a sort of a supply chain network, keeping India in mind, and to give more strength to those supply chain. Indian manufacturers as well as importers give that strength and increase trade and help strengthen that supply chain.
Right. Today in one of our interactions, we also got to know that you all have proposed to the Sri Lankan government to start a renewable project here, a wind project. Would you like to give some more details on that?
Sure. So we have given a proposal, to set up a wind farm, roughly 500 megawatts, and supply into the country, into Sri Lanka. And on a longer term basis, we would like to see if there is a possibility of exporting power from Sri Lanka into India as well, renewable power. As you know that the distance between India and northern part of Sri Lanka is just roughly 40-45 kilometers. So with the transmission line, if there is a possibility and to connect to the Indian grid, so similar to what we have done in terms of supplying power to Bangladesh, where the power plant is in Jharkhand and we are supplying power into Bangladesh through the grid. Through a dedicated grid. So similar sort of proposal we are looking at. We have given to the government, and it's under examination. And we are hopeful that we will be able to move into the next stage of soon.
Okay. What will be the investment on this project?
So roughly it would be $700 to $800 million to start with, and then it will be in subsequent.
So you have anything in your mind, like how much the capacity of this project will be, like in the second phase?
So we've given a proposal of total 2 gigawatts right now, but we have a lot of studies to be done, and we'll see based on the infrastructure as well as based on the studies how much more or less we have to do. But initially we think it will be approximately 2 gigawatts.
One last question on overall, how do you see the outlook for the ports and shipping sector for Adani also, and also for the international and Indian companies?
So I think for APSEZ, we are very confident that by 2025 we would be hitting a milestone of 500 million tons of volume handling. And by 2030 we are hoping that we would be number one port globally in terms of volume. If you look at the overall shipping sector as well as port sector, I think looking at overall scenario, we are seeing a lot of supply chain which was more on a global network becoming more of a regional network. And we do see countries like India playing a very critical role in that regional network and creating those hubs and supply chain for those regional networks. We do believe that India is at a very sweet spot in terms of the next 10 years, so in terms of growth, in terms of what capacity as well as what kind of trade we can generate. And we are very confident on that, and especially the kind of infrastructure that the country is adding. We do believe that India would be perfectly placed in terms of to help in the regionalization of the supply chain.
Okay. Thank you very much for talking to BQ Prime and NDTV.
Thank you.
It was our pleasure, and wish you a very happy Diwali.
Same to you. Thank you so much.
Thanks.